Just a heads up before we get too far into this video. I'll be getting into full spoilers for the ending of this game in the second game. You have been warned. So, in my review for Little Nightmares 2, I said, I'll have to go back and finish the first game to get more of my fill of this world and its characters. Well, I've gone ahead and finished the first game and all its DLC, and oh boy, this game's world is much deeper than I thought, and I want to talk about it. At the beginning of Little Nightmares, it starts with a scene of the camera zooming in on a lady clad in shadows, and as she turns you see she's wearing a white mask. This lady, as she'll be called from here on out, ends up being very important to the story of the game series as a whole, and there's a lot to talk about when it comes to her. But we'll get into that a little later. After waking up from this nightmarish scene, Six, our protagonist for this story, and our partner from the second game, if you can call her that after what she did to our boy Mono in the end, is seen waking up inside of a suitcase. This is the start of our adventure on this hellish ship, or I guess what appears at first to be a ship. As it turns out, it's actually some underwater island structure called the Maw. Which, by the way, how did everyone figure out all the names for these people and the places they travel to? I had to look them all up online after the fact. I know there are comic books for Little Nightmares, so I'm assuming it all gets fleshed out there, but it just seems kind of weird to not reference the names in the games at all. Anyway, after waking up inside this suitcase, Six starts exploring the Maw. After traveling through a few broken down rooms, she comes to one where a man appears to have hung himself. Now, this is something that really piqued my interest. Does this room look familiar to anyone else? Yeah, it looks an awful lot like the room that we see the Thin Man in during the second game, and like the room that Mono eventually ends up in as he is becoming the Thin Man. This could be Mono somehow, after he's been abandoned by Six to the hell of the depths that she let him fall into. There are some theories out there that say the timeline for these games is all mixed up, so I guess it could be possible. It just seems too unlikely to just be a coincidence. This is just within the first couple minutes of the game, and they already had me thinking outside the box. This just goes to show how freaking good these guys at Tarsier Studios are at world building. After spending a couple minutes taking in the Hanging Man, as the internet calls him, Six continues her journey through the Maw, jumping across platforms, pulling on switches, and climbing up ropes made of sheets to get to the main area of this underwater hellhouse. Once in the main area of the Maw, Six comes to a room laden in what appears to be statues of children, but you quickly find out those aren't statues of children, they are children. Children that have been petrified by an all-seeing eye that's surveying the room and turning anyone caught in its sight to stone. So, after solid snaking your way through this room, you come to yet another room. There are a lot of rooms in this place. This time, the room you end up in is covered in beds with sleeping kids in them. Before you have any time to take in your surroundings, though, you have to quickly find cover as you see a creature with freakishly long arms enter the room. As you're hiding under the bed, you observe this mysterious creature almost seeming to take care of these sleeping kids, which almost made me feel like he actually cared about them. It was almost sweet, which made me feel even more uncomfortable than if he had been acting like I expected him to. After leaving this room, Six is taken by a bout of hunger and is almost brought to a halt due to it. Thankfully, Six ends up in front of some bars that lead to a cafeteria of sorts, where she sees a kid sitting at one of the tables. The kid takes pity on Six and throws her their loaf of bread through the bars, and Six can satiate her hunger for now. This is the start of a couple things for Six in my mind. For one, and it may seem small, but I think it actually has more meaning than what is first observed, but Six is just kind of a dick. She didn't thank this kid in any way for giving her some food, so she doesn't fucking die of starvation. She just takes the food and is on her merry way, just ignoring the fact that that could have been the only food this other kid was going to have for the foreseeable future. Yeah, she just gets under my skin sometimes. Another thing this will be the start of is Six's hunger fits. It's a common theme throughout Little Nightmares, and starts to really play a pretty big role later in the game. From there, Six makes her way through a few more corridors, climbs a chain, turns on some electrical panels so she can go through a barred-off area, and goes through another room with another all-seeing eye, and finally finds herself in a room with an even bigger all-seeing eye. But this time, she can use this to view other areas of the mall, like a hidden camera of sorts. This hidden camera kind of made me feel uncomfortable using it, like I expected something to jump out at me or to get pulled inside the TV, a la Little Nightmares 2. Neither of these things happened, but it made me feel on edge nonetheless. What did happen, however, was Six watching some of the baddies from the next couple areas just going about their day. Most notably of which is the lady, who we see in a dimly lit room doing some crochet and humming a tune. Something as simple as this really helped to build up these characters a little bit, from just being the things on each level that chase you around until you either kill them or they give up on chasing you. It made you feel like they're not just sitting around doing nothing until you show up and activate them. But it also brings up the question of, who the hell put these cameras up, and who's been using them? Was it the lady? If so, why would she have one of them placed in her own room? That doesn't make sense to me. So it must have been somebody else who set these up inside the mall. This is never really explored more inside of the game, but I really wish it was. The lady is built up as being kind of the biggest deal on the mall, so there shouldn't be anyone that would do something like this, but there is. This, I think, is one of the few missed opportunities for them to expand on the world a little bit more than they already do. So, after having a little peeping Tom session, Six makes her way further into the mall, jumping and climbing her way further and further into hell. You'll be doing a lot of jumping and climbing in Little Nightmares. Most of the gameplay is just that. Jumping and climbing. Unlike the second game, where they at least let you smack some stuff with a hammer every now and then. There isn't really any combat to speak of in this game, which is fine. It makes you feel more alone and helpless in this game when compared to the second game, giving it its own unique feeling. After you jump and climb your way to the end of this level, Six is taken by another bout of hunger and is again nearly toppled by it. But she's in luck. There is a completely safe cage with some meat in it, sitting right in front of her. This couldn't possibly be a trap of any kind. So naturally, Six goes and eats the meat. Well, as it turns out, it is absolutely a trap, and Six is captured by the lanky arm man that we encountered earlier in this level. Dumbass. When she wakes up in her cage, Six sees the lanky arm man dragging another child in a cage into another room. This will be important for later in the video. After the monster leaves the room, Six starts her escape plan of slamming herself against the cage until it falls over and hopefully breaks open. Thankfully for her, it does. Six then uses another cage, with another child still inside of it, to pull a switch that allows her to access the next room. This is another example of Six being just a complete asshole. She doesn't even attempt to get these kids out of their cages. She just uses them to get herself out, and then on her way she goes. I know it's kind of a kill or be killed kind of world here, but geez, you could have at least checked to see if you could open the door for them. Come on, Six, stop being such a jerk. After opening the door to the next area, Six makes her way up a gate on the door she just exited to be dropped face to face? Well, I guess it's kind of a face. It's more of a fleshy blindfold thing. Anyway, she runs into the lanky arm man again. She sees him wrapping the child he dragged off in some cloth, almost like he was trying to mummify the child. I think I take away that thing I said before about this guy being sweet towards these children. This is messed up. From here, Six has to make her way along the floor using the parts of it that are covered in this cloth material that the monster is using to wrap the children up in, because it turns out he's very blind. But he can hear a fucking bee fart from a mile away. This was the start of my least favorite part of this game. I really had a hard time determining what this guy would and wouldn't hear. If you even thought about stepping on an area of this floor that wasn't covered in this cloth material, he would be on you in an instant. So after many trial and error runs, Six finally makes it through this first encounter with this lanky arm monster and is dropped into a sea of shoes. Yes, a sea of shoes, and oh goody, there's an unseen monster swimming around down here in the shoes. Great. This wasn't bad, honestly. You pretty quickly make it through this area and find yourself in a dimly lit, suspiciously long corridor when our friend from before decides to drop in. Six makes a dash for the end of the corridor and ends up in an elevator with nowhere to go. So she hides in a box and hopes she doesn't get found. Thankfully, she is able to avoid the monster as they ride the elevator together, and when it stops, a couple of these gnome-like creatures that you've been seeing around the mall run off and the monster chases after them, allowing you to escape unseen. Moments like this really show how well Little Nightmares does with building tension. Being just inches away from certain death and having no choice but to sit there and wait, it's just fantastic. From here, Six has a couple more encounters with this monster and makes her way through a hallway with a minecart that she uses to open a door. And here's one example of a huge problem I have with Little Nightmares. I open this door using this minecart as a platform to reach the handle, and as the door is opening, I let go of the button to hold onto the door handle, like I have many times before this. But, unbeknownst to me, I had to hold on to the door as it swung open so I wouldn't fall to my death because the floor was missing on the other side. There was no way for me to know this, and I died on my first attempt. I know, it's a super small problem, and I'm sure there's some way that this is my fault for being a bad gamer or something, but it was annoying, nonetheless. Little Nightmares as a series really suffers from the trial and error gameplay that it relies on, but neither game is long enough to really have this become a major issue. But, after sulking for a bit, Six makes it past this devious puzzle and goes through a few more cramped corridors. After exploring for a bit longer, Six is almost grabbed by the lanky arm monster through a crack in a wall, but she narrowly avoids this. Not really. I messed this up a couple times too. But eventually, Six narrowly avoids this and runs for her life out of this crawl space and finds herself in a hallway just begging for you to run down it. And so she does, from the lanky arm monster that's chasing her. As she makes it to the end of this hallway, Six sees a half-closed shutter door with a metal box just barely holding it up. I wonder what we might use this for. You guessed it. After some trial and error gameplay, Six is able to break the metal box and has the shutter door come flying shut on this monster's grotesquely long arms, and poof! No more lanky arm man. Now he's short, stubby arm man. Doesn't have quite the same ring to it, does it? After this, Six is on her way again, but after making it only a short distance, she's struck by yet another bout of hunger. This time, it happens when you can hear a mouse getting stuck in a mousetrap. Oh no. And you guessed it. Six just digs right into this poor mouse as it's struggling to get itself out of this trap. What the hell is going on with this girl? After having her feast, Six continues onward until she finds herself in a kitchen and runs into the next baddie of the game, a rather large and bloated looking chef. Can I just say, I know we're supposed to be grossed out by this kitchen, but it actually doesn't look that dirty. It looks like they actually take pretty good care of it. I know. They're probably eating human meat here, but I just thought it was interesting that the kitchen that they inhabit doesn't look all that bad. After taking this all in, Six continues further into the kitchen, using the tables as cover as she tries to avoid this bloated chef's gaze. This area was pretty annoying for me. I would be hiding under the tables in an area that I thought there was no way this guy could see me, and bam! He would be grabbing me and throwing me into a stew before I knew it. It was hard to tell, based on the camera angle, what area was safe to hide in. I was eventually able to make it through by not hiding for too long and just running for it. So maybe that's what they wanted you to do? I'm not sure. But after making her way through the kitchen and up to the rafters above, Six is able to get to the next area of this level. She makes her way into a bathroom with two precariously placed toilets sitting right next to each other. What the hell? If it wasn't obvious from this, there are two chefs in this area, twins in fact, both as equally attractive as the other. After making our way into the bedroom for these twins, we see the second chef snoozing in his bed. After making enough noise to get the sleeping twin to wake up and leave the room, we see a key that looks like it should work for a door that was locked in the first kitchen area that we just came from. After grabbing the key and making our way back downstairs and through the door that the key we found goes to, we find ourselves in a room with a meat grinder. From here, we solve a couple easy puzzles to get enough meat in the grinder to use the sausages that they make to swing across to an open ventilation shaft. We then make our way through to a walk-in freezer. We have yet another run-in with one of the twins, and we follow him down an elevator into some kind of butcher's shop. We see a key sitting on the table he's using to cut his meat, and make our way over to a grinder we turn on to get his attention away from the table. This area was a real pain. He would spot me almost immediately, and I would have to play cat and mouse with him through one of the holes in the wall here before he would suddenly forget about me and go back to cutting his meat, and then I would repeat the process. Same as the last area that I had problems with, I ended up being able to complete this admittedly easy puzzle by just running for it as fast as I could before he could see me. I think this was something that I was making harder on myself. I would want to use the mechanics of the cover system in this game too much. Or I guess rather I expected to have to use the cover system to overcome these encounters, but it usually just came down to distract, run, grab, and run again. Not the most engaging gameplay ever, but honestly, I don't think anyone is really playing Little Nightmares for its gameplay. No. We're here for the story and the world, which is great. The way that they can tell a better story than many AAA games without even having any spoken dialogue is just amazing. For instance, this kitchen area that you're going through, on first glance, seems just like a normal kitchen. But if you consider the previous area, the fact that the lanky arm man was wrapping up children and sending them somewhere on meat hooks, and the fact that the meat hooks traveled in the direction of the kitchen, yeah, it's pretty obvious to see what that meat they're chopping up probably is, and they tell you all of this without saying a single word. The storytelling in this game series really is on another level. So, after getting the key, we make our way back down the elevator and through the locked door that the key goes to. This leads us to a washroom, where the twin chefs are hard at work cleaning plates that are presumably covered in the meaty flesh of the innocent children of the mall. So, Six makes her way through the washroom while being chased down by the twins. She then uses the meat hooks to make her triumphant escape from this hellscape of a kitchen and onto the next level. After escaping the twins, Six finds herself climbing a ladder that leads to the outside of the mall, and we get a look at a ship that appears to be docked with the mall and is letting some rather large passengers off. This is the first time that we actually get a good look at what the mall looks like, and the first hint that it's not actually a ship, but an island of sorts. After taking in this parade of flesh, Six makes her way back inside the mall and is led out inside of what looks like a Japanese bathhouse. This setting took me by such surprise. We go from these long, dark metal hallways full of rust and people, or I guess things that want to kill us, to a Japanese bathhouse. Like, what the fuck? Anyways, as Six is making her way through this area, we start to run into these guests that we saw boarding the mall from that ship that was docked with it. We see them eating and drinking themselves stupid, and as you might have guessed, they are in fact eating that same meat that the twin chefs were preparing in the last area of the game. Yeah, the meat that we figured was probably dead children. Yep, that meat. But these guests aren't satisfied to only eat the meat that's already dead. No. If they see you walk by, they ignore the perfectly fine meat in front of them and try to crawl their way over to you so that they can get something a little bit more fresh. Creepy. So, Six uses her tried and true jumping and climbing skills to avoid these grotesque creatures and makes her way further into the bathhouse until she is struck by yet another bout of hunger. Hey, at least this time she's surrounded by food, albeit not the best choice of food. And look! She even has one of our gnome friends offer her a sausage to eat. Oh god, no. Yet again, Six is a giant dick and eats this friendly gnome. What is wrong with her? I'm really not sure why people on the internet seem to like Six so much. She's just not a very nice person at all. Also, keep note of this event for later in the video. It plays a pretty important part to the DLC of this game. And one more thing. Have you guys noticed the Shadow Six appearing in each of the scenes with her feeding? Things like this really add to the theory that the second game was actually a prequel to the first game, since there's a secret ending for that game that shows Six getting out of the TV world, and when she does, you see a Shadow Six appear and look at a newspaper with a picture of them all on it. But we'll get deeper into these theories later in the video. After devouring the nicest gnome of them all, Six makes her way into the heart of the beast from here, the lady's house. Once we get to this area, we pretty soon get to be within inches of the lady and see her standing in front of a broken mirror as she hums that same tune from when we spied on her using the all-seeing eye earlier in the game. She doesn't take note of us, thankfully, and when we drop a jar off her bedside table, instead of running us down, she runs away, which was a little unexpected, to be honest. After grabbing a key that just so happened to be hidden inside of the jar that we dropped, Six makes her way further into the lady's home. Has anyone stopped to think why Six is going deeper into this cruel place? What does she expect to find here? Surely there wouldn't be any way off the mall in here or anywhere close by, right? Unless she knew that and had some idea of what's about to happen. As Six goes further into the lady's house, she finds herself in a room filled with mannequins. Why does it always have to be mannequins? And oh look! The lady is here too. So she gets chased through a couple rooms and eventually finds a mirror sitting on top of a pillow that she instinctively knows to use as a weapon against the lady. So Six uses the mirror against the lady and is eventually able to bring her down, and happy ending, right? Wrong. As the lady lays dying, Six creeps forward towards her, and once she gets to her, oh boy, once she gets to her, she starts to eat her. Yep, Six is now officially a cannibal. But with cool darkness powers now. Yeah, she was able to absorb the lady's powers and can now use them herself. After this, Six leaves the mall, absorbing the life force of any of the guests that would dare even look in her direction. That's the end of the main game for Little Nightmares. This ending really made me rethink the attachment I had to 6 during the second game. I think by playing the games in the order that I did, the second game first, I ended up getting more out of the second game than I otherwise would have. It allowed me to really be taken by surprise when 6 let Mono fall into the depths at the end of the game. If I had known how 6 was in the first game, I think I probably could have seen something like that coming a mile away. But now that we've finished talking about the main game, let's briefly talk about the DLC. There are 3 chapters to the DLC for Little Nightmares, and all of them follow a child by the name of the Runaway. The chapters run in tandem to the main game, and we get to see other perspectives for events that unfolded in the main game. It starts out as we wake up in a room from early in the main game with all the sleeping children in it. This is before 6 has reached this area, and we get to see who made that sheet rope that she climbed early on to get inside the main part of the mall. As the Runaway, you go through some new areas of the game, but you'll be doing mostly the same type of things that you did as 6. That is, running and jumping on things to open doors. But this time, there's a lot more emphasis on using the gnomes that we encounter around the ship. Oh, and you also get an Alan Wake moment where you shine a flashlight you find at these shadow monsters and get them to go pop. There are only a couple of boss monsters in this DLC, one of which being the lanky arm man, and the other being a new monster, who I guess is called the Granny. This new creature will swim around in the water-covered areas of the game, waiting for you to linger too long on a platform so they can knock you off into the water. Monsters like this always made me feel super uneasy. It's not exactly scary, but as it inches closer to you in the water, and you see the bubbles it creates as it gets closer and closer to you, it just makes my skin crawl. So, good job, I guess. There are really only a couple things I want to talk about from this DLC. One being the fact that the Runaway is the kid that you see being dragged away by the lanky arm man when 6 is captured in the first couple levels of the game. Moments like this in games are just really cool to me. It just shows that the creator had a vision for the game and its DLC and worked it all in together. Having overlapping moments like this just gets me all warm and fuzzy inside. The other moment I wanted to talk about was the encounter with the lady that the Runaway has. That's right, in the course of the Runaway, running away, he comes face to face with the lady as well. He actually gets a glimpse of her face though, and this really sets her off. Pretty soon after sneaking his peek, the Runaway is unceremoniously caught by the lady, and after the screen fades to black and then fades back in, we see a gnome standing where the Runaway used to be. That's right, the lady has the power to turn people into the gnomes that we've been seeing all over the mall. From here, we take control of the gnome Runaway. We make our way through a couple of cracks in the walls, and eventually we make it to a very familiar looking room. I'm sure that the very astute of you might have realized by now, but this is the room that 6 ate that gnome in. And oh look! There's a sausage on the ground here. Yep, the Runaway is in fact the gnome that 6 ate. I hate her even more now. So, that's the end of Little Nightmares and its DLC. Altogether, a pretty short game. I was able to complete it in only a day, but it packs the punch of a game that's much longer. It knew how long it needed to stick around to make its point, and oh boy did it make its point. Completing Little Nightmares 1 and 2 really set me down the rabbit hole of theories. For one, early in this analysis I mentioned that I thought that the Hanging Man might actually have been Mono after he becomes the Thin Man after the end of Little Nightmares 2. I think there's a lot of evidence in this room for that. The fact that there's only a single chair sitting in the middle of this room with a door that has an eyeball on it. Just like there was for the Thin Man that Mono let out in the second game, and just how there was at the end of the game when Mono became the Thin Man. I really don't think that there's any way this can be a coincidence. I know there are theories out there online that say the timeline for these games is repeating itself, and that Mono has and will always be the Thin Man. So if there are things like time distortion going on, then maybe there is also space distortion going on. In fact, we already know that there is some space distortion going on in this world since we can enter into the TV world in the second game, and this dumps us out into the signal tower. I think there's a good chance that the signal tower and the mall are both connected in some way. One other theory that I've really been thinking about for this game series is that the second game is a prequel to the first game. There have been a lot of videos going over the evidence for this theory, pretty much confirming it, so I won't go too deep into it. But I do think it's pretty obvious, especially after the secret ending that you can get in Little Nightmares 2, showing the scene I mentioned earlier with Shadow 6 pointing out the mall in a newspaper. But what I will get into is the fact that everyone keeps saying that Six dropped Mono at the end of the second game to prevent his dark powers from overtaking him. Like she could sense something dark inside of him. I think this is complete bullshit. After everything we've seen Six do in the first game, I believe with all my heart that she dropped him because she felt like he betrayed her by not stopping the Thin Man from grabbing her and pulling her into the TV world in the first place. She dropped Mono to get back at him for leaving her, even though Mono came back for her, even though he risked his neck when he could have just let it be. She couldn't forgive what she saw as a betrayal of her trust, and she punished Mono for it. Adding to the fact that many people believe that the signal tower had already taken hold of Six at this point, I can't wrap my head around people thinking she did this to try and save the world from Mono. Anyways, these were just a few of the thoughts I had after beating both games. I really hope we get some more details about this world in the coming years, but it looks like if we do, it won't be from the original developers of the game. Tarsier Studios has said they're done with the Little Nightmares universe and are moving on to new IP. But we'll have to wait and see how it goes if they hand this off to another developer. Hopefully they can put as much love and care into it as Tarsier Studios did. Hey guys, thanks for watching my first analysis type video. I'd really appreciate any constructive feedback that you can give me. I'm sure this video is rough around the edges, with it being my first of this type, but I'd love to do more like this. So leave a comment down below telling me what I did well and what I can do better.